All right, so we were just talking about the vents on top of the battery, right? And I'm seeing that more and more aircraft batteries are getting away from just the old school open vents, but you still see them. And the old lead acid battery, and they have screw type tops, and this is the vent cap that goes in the top. And the vent caps, they got a little vent. Actually, it's right down the center. So a little vent in the center. And then inside, they have a conical weight. And the weight is lead, and it's kind of shaped like that. And so what it does, as you're flying, it kind of sits in a certain way that it doesn't allow, it allows gases to flow by, but if you do much of an angle, it goes off to the side and closes off. So I've got some I'll pass around. One.
These are on the caps?
Yeah, so, I'm sorry. So it has a little, I still in red, like a little kind of thing that comes down here with like a seal right there. So as it goes sideways, it pulls the stem up inside and seals it. So you can see that one is open and then go to a roll and that closes it.
What if we go inverted? It's going to close.
Then it's going to close.
I don't get your
Is there any blue paste that can get on our fingers like that?
It's lead and it's got acid on it. So other than that, no. All right, so caps are in red for no reason other than the fact. Are you guys almost done back there? You want me to wait for a little bit?
Give him 5.
You want me to give you 5? Okay.
Just another break, Kevin.
Yeah. Caps use conical weights to close vent. When battery is at an angle, preventing a spillage. During maneuvers.
Do these caps ever stay open?
I never had a problem with them.
And that's just aircraft batteries that have?
Yes. There is one vent plug per cell. So if I look at the battery and I see 6 of those little things, how many volts is the battery?
12.
If I see 12 of them, there it is a 24 volt. All right. And what did you ask, Daniel?
I was asking if those caps ever get stuck open.
Stuck open? No. Stuck closed? Yes. So I suppose it could get stuck open. If the vents are plugged or a vent is plugged, it's not common. The battery can bulge out. Why would it do that?
Gotta go somewhere.
Oops.
Something gotta give.
That air pressure is going to build up inside the battery and expands it out. All right, the battery. What's the battery filled with? Filled with electrolyte. It is 30%, I think this is a Q&A, sulfuric acid, and 70% water by volume, not weight. I don't have this in my notes, I don't think, but it is an important point. So when you buy batteries, when you go to the store and you buy a battery for your car, you go to the shelf, they hand you a battery. You go out, you put it in your car, you're off to go, right? In theory. Aircraft batteries, not so much. They come dry most of the time. So you go to the store, you order one up, the electrolyte comes separate. And it's helpful that way, I suppose, for shipping, for one thing. So they come in what's called a dry charge state. So they're dry, but they're actually charged. As soon as you pour the electrolyte in, the battery is actually charged, but if you read the instructions, it tells you not to install it in the aircraft. I think somewhere in here I have some stuff where I talk about some certain FARs where a battery has to provide, yes, it's required a 30 to 60 minute capacity. So it's a federal requirement that a battery has between a 30 to 60 minute capacity in the aircraft. So if you just got an aircraft battery, pour the electrolyte in it. It is charged. You can put it in the aircraft. It will start the aircraft, but it may not have that full 30-minute capacity should the charging system stop working. And if that did happen, or 60-minute for IFR, I believe, or night, then you're in violation. You did a bad thing. And that's for the same reason you cannot jumpstart an aircraft. Jumpstart an aircraft, sure, you got it started, and say, oh, let's keep it running. Well, yeah, keep it running. What if the charging system stops in flight? Then you lost your 30-minute capacity, which means you don't have radios. And who are my pilots? Yeah, do you know light signals?
I do.
Do you know light signals?
From the tower?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know them either. So my radio goes dead, I'm in trouble, man. I hope my cell phone still works. Light signals, because all right. So if you don't know, they have a light gun inside the tower, and it's red, white, and green is the only colors they have, and it's like flashing means one thing, something, and it's like, all right, I forgot what that is. I'm just going to admit it right now. So
I got
Executive has had to do that before to a plane.
so anyway, I don't want to get off on that subject because we don't have much time. Yes, you had a point, Steve.
Oh, no. Just
Okay, good.
So you have to let it sit, correct? After you pour it.
You have to charge it.
Charge it.
The instructions actually say charge it. So you put a topping charge on it. All right, so, okay, so that's point number one, is when you get a battery, you have to do that. So there is a thing in aviation where you actually can simply buy electrolyte. Sell it on Spruce, you buy a battery, you should get some. But after the initial electrolyte is poured in, from that period on, you put distilled water into the battery. You don't add electrolyte back in, because it's the water evaporates out in theory, and so you put the water back in, otherwise it creates a big mess. So you don't add electrolyte, you add water. So we're going to talk about electrolyte readings a little bit, and then the question always is, what if you take a reading with the hydrometer and it reads pure water? What do you do? Oh, I add electrolyte. No, don't add electrolyte, you add the water, right? So we'll get to that. So
It's because the battery is died and it's water
Yeah.
inside.
yes, you don't add electrolyte, then that opens up a can of worms. If you say that, I'm saying, what are you going to do with the stuff in it? I don't know. So anyway, so I tell you that to say that that's something you have to do, is often charge it, pour the electrolyte in, and service up the battery and get it going. Make sure you read the directions. I want to say that was actually one of the projects that I had to have people do when I was a mechanic examiner, was definitely was inspect and service a battery. And so sometimes I'd have new batteries I had to go and service, and I would have them do that. So what's the secret to that?
Following the directions.
Read the directions.
Just want to get this straight.
I know. Yeah. Read and follow directions. I know. Other things I should bring up. Okay. So that kind of covers a little bit what I'm talking about the old school style vented cat batteries. And I'm going to take just a break from that and go over these slides with you. Why? Just because I took the time to make them, and it will.
Might as well use them, right, Kevin?
Might as well use them. All right. And so you want to talk about, and you're asking about the video we didn't see. This is basically the last video right here, chemical process inside a Bosch battery. It goes very quickly. And so what I did is I took the movie and I took screenshots and wrote it down so you can actually process it, because it goes so fast. Like, oh, what just happened? So I'm not going to hold you to the chemical process in it, but there's some things you need to know. So I will just go through it really quick. A battery converts chemical energy to electrical energy. That sounds like a Q&A question or test question right there. Positive plate called cathode, the negative plate is called the anode. Electrolyte is made of what? That sounds like a test question right there. You do not need to know that it's H2SO4. All right. So what the video shows is that you have your spongy lead and your what was it? Spongy lead, PB, and your what was it?
Peroxide.
Lead peroxide, right?
Yeah, lead peroxide.
Okay. And then you have HSO4. What is H2SO4? And sulfuric acid in there. All right, so we got that floating around in there. What will sulfuric acid do to your clothes?
Make it whole.
Yes, I've ruined a nice set of jeans here. Thank you very much. All right, so the cathode is made of lead. Now, it's different stuff. This one has lead dioxide, according to that movie, and the anode is made of lead, PB. I think in the book there, I got the notes before. They changed the names a little bit, but that's okay. All right, during discharge, the sulfuric acid breaks into two parts, hydrogen ions with a plus charge and sulfate ions with a negative charge. The sulfate ions combine with the lead plate, this is discharge, and form lead sulfate. Lead sulfate is a bad thing, giving up their negative charge, which gives the lead plate more electrons. Okay, so the lead plate's going to get more electrons. Lead sulfate is a problem. It's what causes batteries to kind of not work. So a note up here, so that little discharge is going through here. So during discharge, the hydrogen ions combine with the oxygen in the lead peroxide, forming water. So what happens to this electrolyte? It forms into what? Water. Okay, so it starts out sulfuric acid, and during the discharge process, it goes towards water. So I tell you that to say, if you're in a, what's that book I read? Flight of the Phoenix scenario. Anybody read Flight of the Phoenix?
I don't read Kevin, I watch movies.
I know. And not even documentaries, I can tell.
Exactly.
So it's an old book, because I actually enjoyed it. So Flight of the Phoenix, there's a flight somewhere, I forget where it is. They crash land in the desert. And here they are in the desert. It's World War II period. And they have to take this airplane that has crashed, and they make an airplane out of the parts left over. It's like a twin boom airplane, and they make out of one of the booms, they make a flying airplane out of it. So you're in a Flight of the Phoenix type situation, and you're thirsty. I tell you, I guess, take the battery, discharge it completely, and you've got water.
That's so good.
Okay. Probably don't do that. It would just taste bad. All right, process takes electrons from the positive plate, making the plate more positive. The lead peroxide combines with the sulfate ions to create lead sulfate on the positive plate. Again, lead sulfate, not good. Combined chemical reaction is that the plus plate has a deficiency of electrons, while the negative plate has an excess electrons to supply power. Well, that's a good thing. All right, so during discharge, the discharge chemical reaction will continue until the load is disconnected or a charging current is applied. During the charging, okay, here's where I don't want you to get confused. During the charging process, the electrochemical process is reversed. The charger creates an excess of electrons at the negative plates. So you will never hook them up backwards. You will always have the positive to the positive and the negative to the negative. However, during the charging process, it's reversed. So where the negative electrons were from negative to positive, now we're putting negative electrons back in this way, okay? But you're still doing the negative on the negative. And what happens to the electrolyte? It becomes less water and more sulfuric acid, all right? Positive hydrogen ions are attracted to the excessive electrons, the negative plate, which reacts with the lead sulfate to reform sulfuric acid and lead. Battery is now full. Electrical energy has been converted to chemical energy. So electrical energy is then converted to chemical energy. So that's the reverse process. So, okay. Now we get back to something important. Continuing to charge the battery after it is full or applying too much charging current will cause the water, that's H2O, to break down into hydrogen and oxygen.
Yes.
The hydrogen and oxygen bubble out of the electrolyte and form hydrogen and oxygen gas. That sounds like a very explosive thing.
There's your fire and oxidizer.
There's your fire and your oxidizer. So when do we get this hydrogen and oxygen problem? Overcharge or too much, too fast. So trying to decide if I should tell you the story, but I guess I will since I brought it up. So where I worked, when I started there, it was, needed work. We had a paint room. So I tell you, this is where we did painting. So when you do painting, you use an air gun, and you have what going around? Paint fumes and all that kind of stuff, right? Well, not only that, microphone's on back. This is a long time ago, so OSHA place is not even there. So we had a rack made out of 1x4s with the sockets for light bulbs, the porcelain sockets with Romex, exposed Romex. And so the guy would be smoking as he was spraying, and when he would, need to light his cigarette, he would actually hang his spray gun on the Romex, and it would pull it, and it would arc. And because of the strain on the Romex is cable that's supposed to be in the walls, it's what's in the walls.
Yeah.
And it would arc as the weight of the spray gun would pull it out. And I guess right before I started, they actually set the whole place on fire and burned up a set of wings because it was fabric and dope and it fell on it. But anyway, they continued to use it. I tell you that story to tell you, in that same room in the corner was this World War I surplus battery charger. And in battery chargers, you can have, what are the two types you can have? Constant potential and constant. This was a constant current. So in constant current, you dial in the amps, and the voltage will do whatever the voltage does to give you the amps you want. And this thing went up to 100.
Damn.
Yeah, it looked like it looked like that black box that it looked just like that. So big dial and everything. And so one of the guys I work with, people bring in their batteries. Oh, the battery's dead. He's like, well, I'll fix it up for you. I mean, he's a good guy. Always tried to save people money. So he would take in the paint room and put it on the floor and hook up those leads. You just crank it, and just leave it. And there was no timer, no nothing. It was just on. And you would walk by, and oh my, the smell was horrendous. It's the rotten eggs. And there would be a stain, a wet stain around the battery where this stuff is actually like a little volcano coming out. Just leave it like that for a while. I got him. Well, what his theory was, and in theory it made sense, he was trying to blow off this hydrogen sulfate because it builds up on the lead sulfate. Sorry, I said hydrogen sulfate. I knew that was wrong. Builds up, the lead sulfate builds up on the plates and prevents the battery from working. So his theory was, we just got to blow it off. And in theory, that is true. But that much heat warps the plates and pretty much cooks the battery. But, he'd had enough luck with it that it sometimes worked.
If not, well, it was a bad battery anyways.
Well, when I took over this office right here, one of the things, I found all kinds of weirdness. One of the things I found was this little envelope, and I opened it up, and it was just this little, I can show you, it's across the street now, just this little thing, and it's about, the size of this little tiny remote, but, yay thin, and a circuit board, and it said, battery desulfonator. And so I looked it up, and it's supposed to, you put it on a charger in line, in series of the charger, and it's supposed to pulsate. And it has electrical pulsations that are supposed to flick off the hydrogen, or not hydrogen, say it again, the lead sulfate. So I had a couple students, we used the heck out of it trying to save some batteries that were way beyond saving, but we hooked it up to oscilloscopes and stuff, and yeah, you could see that it was doing some stuff, and some people swear by them, but it's a lot better than, cranking that up to 11. So all right, what were our takeaways from that one? From this right here? Lead sulfate is bad, and we get lead sulfate from leaving batteries dead.
And don't use arcing wires to light a cigarette.
Well, hang on, we're gonna
Don't use the World War II battery charger.
No, it's okay. So real takeaways though, the lead sulfate is bad, and you get that in a discharged state. So leaving a battery in a discharged state is going to kill it because the lead sulfate sticks to the plates. So don't leave a battery dead. You got to keep them charged.
And don't overcharge them because it can be
okay. Now, don't overcharge them because as you overcharge them, either too much amperage or continue to charge after they're already charged, you're going to get hydrogen oxide, which is extremely explosive. And to prevent an explosion, should there be some of this gas, because it is possible,
lots of
ventilation, and always disconnect it
from the plug.
From the plug if you're charging from the house. Yes, and then do it. Yeah.
You said what plates does the lead sulfate stick to?
Off the top of my head, I don't remember. I think I don't remember which plate it is. It's the plates in the battery.
Oh, I didn't know if it was the positive or the negative.
Yeah, I don't remember if it's positive necessarily or negative, huh?
It's a negative.
Okay.
So,
Weird if you just read.
Well,
so
Yeah.
this water is evaporate from the battery, right?
right.
And the sulfuric acid became more concentrated.
Yes.
And so why you put the distilled water in the battery?
Okay, so
And the electrolyte became the good concentration. Right?
okay, so we're going to go over this a little more. I'll get more into this. But as the battery discharges, the electrolyte becomes more water. So if we took a hydrometer reading, which something will tell us if we have water or specific gravity, water or sulfuric acid, and it looks like it's more water, do we add sulfuric acid?
No.
No.
Charge it.
We charge it, and that reverses the process and makes this more like, brings it back to a more acidic state. All right, but so we don't ever add electrolyte. I shouldn't say ever. There are some scenarios in the book where they might have you do that, but as a general rule of thumb, you don't. You just top it off with distilled water because it's the distilled water that evaporates out. So you charge it. Okay, so your book, you can see that it talks about charge it, then add the water. We're talking lead acid strictly here. I will just tell you as a rule of thumb, if I open up a battery, if it's something I can open up and look, and the water is below the level of the plates, I'm going to add some water to bring it to the top of the plates and then charge it and then adjust the level up more if I need to. But I would never try and charge a battery if I could see one of the plates was dry. That's just doesn't seem like a good idea to me. Okay, what else we got? So we got that going. All right, so that's kind of the old school battery, the vented type. Now they're coming out with, have come out with, they've been out for a long time, sealed batteries. Sealed lead acid battery. They are made of seals. They grind up little baby seals. One of them is called a valve regulated lead acid battery, or VRLA. What kind of battery is that Concord you're working with? What? VRLA?
Not serviceable, by
Not served, but is it a VRLA? I think it is. All right. Same chemical reaction, or operation, I should say.
yes, it's really
Same chemical operation as we'll call it a flooded lead acid, which I'm just calling the old school. But this particular one, that doesn't vent out the gases the same way. Like you can see with these caps, they're just wide open, right? And you can get to them and you can unscrew them. And by the way, when you're charging a battery that has these type of caps, number one, don't leave the caps open because dirt gets in them. So what you do is you unscrew them, and I just kind of sit them on top of this falls in, but sit them just set it there so that if this were for some reason plugged up, you wouldn't get a pressure inside the case. It would just pop off the little, like a pressure cooker, pop that off. So, but in the VRLA battery, they're just flat on top and you can see nothing. Now, if you take a pick and you pop open the top, you will see that there are screw caps and you can get into the battery, but you're not supposed to. Let's see, battery is sealed. Battery is sealed and gases are stored within the battery at a pressure to 1.5 psi. So as the pressure builds up, what's the battery going to do? Like a frightened pufferfish. It's just going to expand out. So if you pull out a VRLA battery and like, whoa, right, thing's kind of bulgy. Don't condemn it. Just poke a hole in it. Relieve the pressure. No, don't do that. All right, so that's just what it does. All right. Yeah.
If one of the cells is bad, how do you check that?
That's the thing. You know, instructions for continued airworthiness do not allow you to open it up and do anything.
So
Just do it.
just
all
replace
right.
it.
It's done. It's gone. Yeah. So in
I believe so.
yeah, and that's why I was telling you. This is the battery that that very specific battery I mentioned is. I even playing with it right now. That came out of my aircraft. And my partner actually opened it up and pulled the caps out, and it looked low, and he added electrolyte. And then then during the charging process, it spewed it all over the aircraft. No, don't do that.
Is your partner an AMP?
What's that?
If it bulges, it's through, you can't use
No, it's fine. It's going to bulge. So these things are going to bulge a little bit because they're storing up a 1.5 psi, which is a lot, really, if you think about 1 pound, 1.5 pound for every tiny square inch. It's a lot of pressure. So it can bulge, and they will bulge a little bit. It's not that uncommon. So what happens if we go over 1.5 psi?
Release valve somewhere?
Yeah, pressure over 1.5 psi is vented. So they have like a pressure relief valve in it. Is vented. But the amount is usually minimal. Provided the charging system is in good operating order. If you have a charging system that's set too high, it's going to cook the battery. It's going to create what kind of gas? Hydrogen. And it's got to go somewhere, and it's going to start venting. So this assumes that you have a good charging system that's properly adjusted. So it is common. It is common for a VRLA to bulge slightly. All right, there are two types of VRLA in existence. There is the absorbed glass mat, or the AGM battery. And that one is, again, same chemical process, but the electrolyte's contained within glass mats that act like a sponge to keep the electrolyte next to the plates. Almost like a dry battery. Much less electrolyte is used as compared to a flooded battery. So electrolyte is contained in glass mats. What kind of glass do you think I'm talking about? It's fiberglass, not like window pane glass. I'm like, I don't get it. Window panes don't. That act like a sponge to keep electrolyte next to the plates. And let me see, the other one is, oh yeah, I got this. Much less electrolyte is used. As compared to a flooded battery. And then they have gel batteries. Gel batteries, or sometimes called just a gel cell. And in these batteries, again, same chemical process, but the electrolyte is mixed with silica to create a gel. So you don't have a spillage problem with these batteries. Sealed batteries are non-serviceable. And by that, I mean you can't add water. But you sure as heck can do all the other stuff. Inspect it for leaks, corrosion. You're going to get a lot of corrosion around the battery terminals. So you got to pull them out, you got to clean them, clean off the terminals. Some of them are going to have instructions for continued airworthiness. You're going to see this, at least I do. ICAW. What does that mean? Instructions for continued airworthiness. So, ICAW, instructions for continued airworthiness. It kind of became a big deal, I don't know. I was working, it was a long time ago actually. It just all of a sudden became this huge thing, but everything had to have instructions for continued airworthiness. It was during an interesting time in aviation. There used to be a thing, well, it still exists, but good luck with it, called a field approval. And because in an aircraft, you can't just do what you want to do, right? You got to have approved data to do something. But there was this, up until a certain period of time, you could do whatever you could dream of, do it to an airplane, put it on a 337, and call a guy from the FAA office to come down, a local inspector, and if that inspector bought off on it and signed it, you were good to go. You know, and I remember I did one plane, I think I had 13 or 14, we call them field approvals, just weird things. It was one aircraft. I mean, a friend of mine bought it, and I had to make this thing legal. It had like Cessna seat, it was a Globe Swift, it had Cessna seats in it. They put spacers underneath the horizontal stabilizer to change the angle of incidence, removed spin strips from the wings, changed the wheels and brakes to something from some other type of airplane. I just went down the line. I'm like, whoa, and I did this annual. Then all the way down the wing, you know, and the inspector showed up and just, you know, stamp, sign, stamp, sign, stamp, sign. But the thing is, every single one of those, I had to write my own instructions for continued airworthiness. So it was this, and there's the FAA gives you guidance on how to do it. So I had this whole list I had to write out exactly what had to be done every single annual or oil change or whatever it was. I don't know why I tell you that story, but anyway, so you have to write that. But now, and then back then you didn't have it in the manuals either. But now when you get a new manual, you can always find the ICAW section, and you should be doing that on every annual. What are my instructions for continued airworthiness? So, as for example, and I was Gill batteries for the longest time. As long as you just pulled them out and kind of did what I'm telling you, you know, fill up the water, charge it up, make sure that no corrosion, you were good to go. But now the newer manuals have the instructions for continued airworthiness, where they want you to actually pull it out, do measured discharge tests, and all these other things. So things change. All right, sealed batteries. All right, use caution when charging. This applies to all batteries. Use caution when charging. Why?
Oxygen, boom.
Sulfuric acid.
Okay. So, actually, let's just say in regards to the VRLAs. Why should I use caution when charging the VRLA batteries?
Pressure.
They expand.
Okay. They expand. Why do they expand?
They don't, that's
Is there
only
really
at
not
1.5 pressure.
Okay. Batteries inability to gas out, so it's going to build up pressure. And mechanics inability to add water. So if you blow all the water out, all the electrolyte, well, you're not going to get any back in there. All right, so my next points were operating theory, which I kind of went over, which is not really the scope of this practice. And then it brings me to, I wrote, as a mechanic, you need to understand. What do we need to understand? What are my takeaways from the slides that I did? And that was hydrogen gas is very explosive. Sparks can explode the battery. Talked about which to disconnect first. As a battery charges, one of the things you can see as it's charging, if you pull the vent caps off and get your eye right up in there like that, is you can watch them bubble. So that's that. And bubbling in itself isn't bad. It's part of the charging process. It's when it over bubbles that you start getting into problems. So it's one of the things that I like the caps off, because you can kind of just pop them off and you can look and see how each cell is doing. If you get a couple cells that are bubbling nice and 2 or 3 that are doing nothing, it kind of tells you that those are charged and those are still dead. And what's going on with that battery? Why is it different? Lead sulfate, good or bad? And when are we going to get that? Okay. Okay. And most of you already know this. I'll write this one. Water
What about water, Kevin?
has a higher. Wait a minute. Is that what I wanted to write? I'm going to write it in a way that makes more sense. Water will freeze sooner than sulfuric acid. So, if you leave a battery in a discharged state, what is the electrolyte in the battery? Water. And so, the battery will tend to freeze sooner. But if it's fully charged, it's sulfuric acid, and it can take a much lower temperature before it starts to freeze. So, that is why you always want to make sure that you charge the battery before it potentially freezes.
Especially if the plane's going up.
Especially if the plane
It's going up. The further higher you up you go, the colder it gets.
That's true, but it's charged. It's on the charger.
Right. Well, if the charging system's out.
If the charging system's out, I think probably freezing is going to be the list. It's a good thinking. Good thinking.
And the engine's a little bit warm too.
I don't want to pick on it. That was a good point. That was, all right, maintenance. Maintenance of lead acid batteries. Well, I could just abbreviate lab. Look at that. That was really cool. All right.
I see what you did there.
See what I did there? Lead acid batteries, LAB. That's just going to take more. This is like SeaWorld. I guess lead acid batteries. It would have been faster just to do that. All right. Rule number 1. Always wear what?
Safety glasses.
And what was the word you just used?
PPE.
PPE. What's that stand for?
Personal protective equipment.
That is correct, but I wanted it glasses. Jeez.
Well, you also
Glasses.
gloves. And
You should, but I'm having a hard enough time getting you guys to wear safety glasses. So you should wear gloves, clothing protectors, safety glasses, the whole thing. But if you're only going to wear one thing, please wear safety glasses. Remove which side first?
negative.
When removing from the aircraft. Install which one first? I don't know why. Do not short circuit
Can we do that as like
battery.
a test over there?
What tool should you use to short circuit a battery if you're going to do it?
Good size wrench.
What?
right?
Let me
15,
try this out.
16.
What tool are you probably going to be using when you short circuit the battery?
Good size wrench.
Someone else's
A
wrench.
good sized wrench or the Simpson meter. Trust me on that. If you hook a Simpson meter up to a battery, that is the same thing as
A wrench.
short circuiting. Do not service near open flame or sparks. Do not jump start. Do not jump start aircraft. That also goes for push starting them, which is the same thing as hand propping something with a dead battery. You're not supposed to do that. One, the battery people tell you it can damage the battery.
What is that E says? Do not service.
Do not service near open flame or sparks. Can damage the battery. So I start writing faster, I get nervous. I can hear everybody already packing up, and I'm like, I got ways to go. Why? Because aircraft require a 30 to 60 minute battery capacity in flight.
I'd like to see the long-ass jumper cables that you use to jumpstart.
That is FAR 23.1357 HI. 30 minutes for aircraft certified to 25,000 feet and 60 minutes for aircraft certified over 25,000 feet. So if you have a dead battery and you jump it and the person, just keep it running, it'll charge while you're flying. You take off and 5 minutes later the alternator quits, you will have no battery.
Does it say anything about day or night?
Nah, it's just what I have right there. Yes?
So when you say, if you were to jump start an aircraft, it would just be like the ground power unit?
Yeah.
Hooked up to the...
Yeah.
Well, you just
'Cause we do that at work sometimes. Some pilots at executive ask for it.
I know. It's done all the time.
You just leave it on there next to 5 minutes.
Yeah. There is another do not that I didn't write on here.
Do not connect the meter.
I think I cover it later in NICADs, but do not service NICAD and lead acid, LAB,
Well, when you do the questions, it'll tell you
in
what
the
that
same room. Now I'm going to tell you that I think it's a Q&A. I think they make a big deal out of it, but yet I read something that says it's totally false. That there's absolutely no, and the theory is lead acid battery is acid and NICADs are an alkali, so the two cross each other out and cancel each other out, I should say, and therefore if you get the cross contamination will neutralize the battery, but it's really stretching things pretty far to do that.
Wouldn't you have to fill it on the other battery?
Well, that's why I said I actually read some real literature that said this has never been a case.
Okay.
But they make it sound like it's the fumes in the air cross-contaminating and it's killing the battery. And, you know.
Can I ask you a question?
Well, you just did, so.
When you say aircraft requires a 30 to 60 minute battery capacity,
Yeah.
that means like if your generator alternator goes out in
Yep.
flight,
Yep.
you have 30.
Hang on.
You have 30 to 60 minutes to get to a safe spot to land or something.
The aircraft battery is designed so that it will run all of the systems, including, I guess, the radios, for a period of 30 minutes.
Okay.
And yes, to get you to a place where you would land.
Hey, thanks for asking.
I was gonna ask that too.
Kevin.
I didn't know what that meant.